We have a passage here under the title Session 7. And there are, for this passage, I believe there will be around about 4-5 questions. It's a short passage. So let's try this out. There are 5 questions to this passage. And let's say that we give you 10 minutes for this passage. So this is 7:40. 7:50 we take up the analysis for it. Okay. So your time begins now. Your time is up. Are you over? Have you finished?
Yes, sir.
Can we start, sir? Have you finished the assignment? Yes, sir. You're taking pretty long, actually. Seems you're not
Finished, sir.
finished. Everybody is finished?
Finished, sir. Finished.
Okay. See, it was a very short passage. 10 minutes would have been ideal, but you have taken actually 18 minutes to do that, which basically reflects that you are not adequately put exercising on this section at all. Please do that. Okay. Now, let's go back to the passage. Now, please try and understand what we need to do in order to understand the passage well. So there are actually 4 steps that you need to take. The first step basically is carefully attending to that topic by reading and rereading the text. Once you have gathered enough facts and information, you develop a framework of the concepts which are being discussed here. So what do? You basically go through the text carefully with attention on the topic being discussed, reading and rereading the text, and gathering facts and information, which helps you to develop a clear framework of the concepts that are being discussed in that particular text. So, what is the concept being discussed here in this particular text? See, any concept or any conceptual framework, will basically require a bit of subjective interpretation, your viewpoint, while also simultaneously acknowledging the context. And that will help you, your interpretation, your subjective viewpoint, along with the context that is given in the text. So step 1 is that you read, you reread, you try and develop a clear framework of concepts there based on the facts that you have been given and the information that is coming to you. Now that you have understood the concept, you try and locate important or relevant chunks, lines in the text. And you try to illustrate these with the exact quotation given in the text. Now, as I've been trying to tell you about theme, I have been trying to tell you that the shortest definition of a theme is that it is a summary. And this summary, in a very easy, relevant manner, provides you with enough material for useful analysis and evaluation. So which basically will require that you have a mixed method of analysis. A mixed method will require a combination of qualitative and quantitative information. Now that is going to give you a data-driven inductive process. You have a fact, you have a data, and you have interpreted it as relevant to the topic, and based on that you have developed your interpretation, your viewpoint. You may also think that a theme is basically a description of some phenomena, and this description is using both an inductive and deductive approach. An inductive approach is basically, last time I told you, it is probabilistic, whereas a deductive is a confirmed that if this has happened, then that will follow. That is the basic format. So what you are using actually in the analysis of a text is, it is both inductive and deductive. So you are organizing the facts, and it is a mixed approach. So there is some amount of your subjective interpretation, which is probably true or probably not true. But then there are facts and data given, and based on that, you come to a formal conclusion. So basically, when you say that a theme is basically a description of a phenomena, wherein we are employing both methods of understanding, inductive and deductive. So what shall we get as a final result of this analysis? We are going to get a pattern of information. Is going to this pattern of information will basically organize your observations and also help you to interpret. Now, in any theme analysis, you need to go back and forth again and again. It is not that you do it only once. You try and do it as often as possible. So in other words, there is a word for this process. When you go back and forth, you call it as an iterative process. It is a repetitive process of going back and forth, and it is also a self-introspection. In other words, you need to interact with the text. So any successful analysis of a text requires, number one, that you collect the data and you proceed simultaneously with your analysis. It is not that first you gather the facts and the data, and then you get into the second stage of analysis. No, both the stages have to go simultaneously. Gathering the data, analyzing the data. So, if you look at this, any summary that you have done in your school, you may have discovered that it is all about paraphrasing. You shorten the sentence to enter as much of information or as many information as possible. So basically, to successfully paraphrase something, and we'll do all this. In this particular text, we are going to do that. We need to paraphrase. And to successfully do a paraphrase, you must read and reread, gather facts and data, analyze them simultaneously, and then this enters your conscious or your unconscious mind because you are reading, you are listening, and you are summarizing. So, when you implement this exercise, in each paragraph, you need to outline the key parts or whatever be the key points that you are making. And then you have to ask yourself, whatever key point that you make for that particular paragraph, you need to ask yourself, what is your immediate thought about that particular key point? What comes to your mind first? The second question is, what do you think, which information is critical? Third, which information is relevant? Then, how do you really decide which key point is more relevant than the other? So, you look at the evidence, the proof, and then you try to see what kind of a, how is the integration of relational idea is being done. So, basically there are three types of themes. First order theme, cluster theme, and second order theme. For example, if there is a feedback exercise, now that is a first order theme because it is focusing on the relationship between the manager and his executive. For a feedback which should be credible and should induce respect, trust, and lead to high contact, that means a more collaborative relationship. So such themes are known as first order theme. So first order themes are basically talking about relations. Now clustered themes are those themes where there is some kind of a familiarity with a character or a person which improves the credibility and gives you an idea about the situational conflict and what kind of a feedback that person was getting. And second order theme could focus on something like a familiarity relationship which enhances the relevance of the feedback. So the first order is basically focusing, first order themes, they focus on relations. For in this particular example of a feedback that I have taken, and any discussion regarding this feedback, you can say that there is a first order theme wherein we are focusing on the relationship between the boss and his subordinate, in terms of credibility, trust, respect, etc. Whereas in a clustered theme, readers or listeners become familiar with a particular character and not about the relationship. The focus shifts from relationship to people, to individuals. Who is giving feedback to whom? And therefore, this can also increase credibility, or it can lead to some situational conflict if the boss and the subordinate are not on good terms. So all these things you will call as clustered theme, because this is coming uh, from the two characters interaction, because of the need for feedback. And since these two persons are not comfortable with each other, they have a hostile relation, so there is bound to be situational conflict. So if in the text there is a paragraph talking about the conflict between the manager and the executive, you say that there is a clustered theme, because the focus is on persons and not on relationship. And wherever the focus is on relationship, you say that this is a first order theme. And second order themes are those themes where that familiarity improves the relevance of the feedback. So I think I have given you a pretty good idea. So let us interpret this paragraph, this passage. So who is going to do this for us? So what is it saying? Saying the Hindu theory is that religions do not come from without, but from within. Good. It is my belief that religious thought is in man's very constitution. So much so that it is impossible for him to give up religion until he can give up his mind and body, until he can give up his thought and life. As long as a man thinks, the struggle must go on. And so long man must have some form of religion. Thus we see various forms of religion in the world. It is a bewildering study, but it is not, as many of us think, a vain speculation. Amidst this chaos, there is harmony. Throughout these discordant sounds, there is a note of concord, and he who is prepared to listen to it will catch the tone. Yes. What is the logical consistency of this paragraph? Can anybody explain it to me? I have just told you that you need to carefully attend to the topic of what is the phenomena that is being read by you. You need to read and reread. And after you have internalized or understood the facts and information, you develop a clear framework. So can I have the framework from you? Over here. Okay. Who's going to give me the framework? Now in theme, please, you can write down also. The first step is trying to find out what is that idea which has been logically and consistently built. And there are facts and information given here. So what are these facts? Anybody? Can anybody suggest? Can anybody suggest? Or if you are finding it difficult, should I help you?
There are facts given about.
Be loud enough so that I can hear.
There are facts that are given about like Socrates and a Brahmin.
No, we are talking about the first paragraph. Okay. We are talking about the first paragraph. What is the consistent theme here? And I told you, in order to extract a theme, you need to take 4 steps. The first step is logical consistency. The second step is summarizing the data. And the third step is interpretation. And finally, you look at various relations which will signify whether your understanding will stand or will collapse in the event of some new data coming. So, one is logical consistency is the first step in theme extraction. The second step is summarization. The third is interpretation. And the fourth is how strong is significantly your understanding, how significant your understanding is, so that in the event of a new information, it does not collapse. It is robust. So these are the 4 steps. And I want you to experience these 4 steps with me in this particular passage. Now, what is logical consistency? I said this is carefully reading and rereading, paying attention to the phenomena being discussed. Here the phenomena is the origin of religion. I have assimilated the facts and information given. For example, it says the Hindu theory about religions is that religion comes from within, from the soul of an individual. The author says that religion is basically the essence of every man. He cannot give up religion. If he gives up his religion, he has to give up his mind. He has to give up his body. So, religion is something which integrates the mind and body. It is an integral whole. And then it elaborates the point why it is about the mind and body. And the elaboration of this point is that as long as a man thinks, the struggle must go on. So your thoughts will not come to a final solution. It is a perpetual struggle. And as long as you are struggling, you need to have religion. And therefore you see a variety of religions in the world. It is confusing. But of course, this speculation, this trying to look into the future, into a dark future, trying to understand or make sense of this chaos, although it looks like a chaos, but there is an internal harmony. And although it looks like as if there is a noise, but if you have really struggled and if you have really thought, you will listen to the harmony, you will listen to the concord, you will catch the tone. Now I am arranging these facts and information that are given here in a clear framework of what it involves conceptually. So whenever I try to build a conceptual framework, it has to be a mix of subjective interpretation and also of the context, so that we are sure that we are understanding exactly what is being narrated. And for that, in order to be sure, we need to identify relevant parts of the text to illustrate the findings with the exact quotations. So we do that. So my interpretation is that religion is a man's quest. Every man is in search of the final truth. And therefore, religion is never imposed from outside. It comes from within. You search for a meaning for your existence on this earth. Why are you here? Why are you scared of unemployment? Dogs, animals don't get afraid of that. And they can still fill their tummy. They don't bother. They are not worried. They live by a day. You can also jolly well have that approach. And therefore, if you have that approach, you cannot think. Animals don't think. But man thinks. And because thinking is very fundamental to man, thinking is what makes a man a man. Thinking distinguishes him from other animals. And as long as you think, it has to struggle with the idea of religion. You can only give up religion when you give up your mind and body, or you give up your thought and life. So if you look at it in a matrix form, or that function, thought is a function of mind. Body is a function of life. And as long as your mind is thinking, the struggle of life will continue to happen. And if there is a contest, if there is a struggle in life, you have got to face the problem of what is the meaning of your life, what is the meaning of your experience. If you are scared of tomorrow's uncertainty, if you are scared, are you living the life of a human being? Or You are living at the level of an animal. Anybody? And because there are as many patterns of thought, therefore there are different forms of religions in the world. And therefore it becomes quite a confusing study. But it need not be a confusing study. It need not be a vain. Vain is actually here, it means pride. It is not an indulgence in your sense of vanity. But whatever you look at as chaos, actually there is an inner harmony. Whatever you think is a noise, actually it is a sweet music, provided you catch the tone. Is that clear to you? Hello? One by one, please respond.
Yes, sir. It's
Is
clear.
that logical consistency of the ideas becoming clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Only one person?
Yes, sir.
Okay, who is he? Please tell your name also.
Yes, from Predit.
Okay,
And from Manideep also, sir.
Manadi. Okay, wonderful. And Aditya? Who else is there? I think we have Anshula here. Anshula, is it not clear to you?
So actually, I found it a little different one,
Huh?
a little different type of passage.
But I'm explaining it. Is it not clear to you now?
And
No, if
I
it is
got
not
it
clear,
actually.
no,
Yeah.
if it is not clear, you must be ready to say that it is not clear. It's fine. There's no issue. I will try and explain again. See, what I'm trying to explain to you here is that when you get a text, a passage, the first paragraph is the key. It is the heart. If you can feel the heartbeat, if you can feel the pulse rate like a doctor, you can diagnose. Now there are other tests that you can do, but all that comes later. The first thing that you do is you take your stethoscope, you examine the chest, you examine the breathing, you examine the heartbeat, and you take the pulse. Now, if all the readings, the outcome of these observations, if they are matching, if that is called logical consistency. If you're having fever, you're likely to have a high pulse rate and a high heartbeat, and your breathing will be equally problematic. That it will show to the doctor, and then he will know that yes, the person is sick. What could be the reason? Now there are 1,000 reasons why you can have these complications. So he will remove 999 and zero down to that particular cause that has led to your fever. Now he will conduct another battery of tests, which will require urine, routine and culture, 2 types of urine test. Next test will be stool test. The third test will be a blood test of different type. If he thinks it is hormonal, he will prescribe hormonal test. If he thinks because it is because of deficiency of thyroid, he will also prescribe a thyroid test. So he may prescribe you 10 different types of blood tests. and he will get his diagnosis because he has determined the range. And this is exactly what you do as a reader of a text. How do you do that? You do that by carefully paying attention to the phenomena, to the topic that is being read by you. So reading is first thing. The second thing is rereading the text again. In the process of reading and rereading, some facts, some information will be registered in your brain. Based on that, recording of facts and information, because of reading and rereading, a process of assimilation will happen. As a result of assimilation, a conceptual framework will emerge. Because of the conceptual framework, based on your wisdom, knowledge, experience, you are likely to subjectively interpret those facts and information. And this is contextual, depends on every individual's background, every individual's knowledge level. So there will be a difference in comprehension. That difference is because of the difference in life experience, because of the difference in educational qualification, the difference in, because whether you are a fresher or you are a working executive. If you are a working executive with 4 or 5 years of experience, you are likely to appreciate this passage or this paragraph slightly more than a fresher, slightly more than that. Now, these are called subjective interpretations or subjective viewpoints. So whatever you have assimilated in the form of a conceptual framework, you will start subjectively interpreting them in your particular context. Now that process is known as understanding. Now once you come to say 3 concepts and you identify them in 3 different paragraphs, what you need to do is underline those sentences, and these are called relevant chunks. Relevant chunks of the text, which is basically illustrating your findings with the exact quotations given in the passage. So here in this particular first paragraph, he starts with a specific theory called the Hindu theory. Hindu theory of religions. It comes from without or it comes from within. Without means outside, external. Within means internal. So the query or the thirst or the desire for religion, as per the author, as per Hindu theory, is that the desire for religion comes from within the soul of a human being. The next line is explaining that. He says that all religious thought constitutes a man. What is man? How is a man different from other animals? Say, for example, a donkey. A donkey does not think. A man thinks. So religious thought is the building block which distinguishes a man from an animal. And therefore, no man can abandon religion unless he agrees to abandon his body and his mind. That means you leave religion only when you are dead mentally and dead physically. And if you aren't going to die physically and you aren't going to die mentally, you can only give up religion if you stop thinking and stop breathing. And as a conclusion, the next sentence says, as long as a man thinks. Now he's explaining why religion stays with you. One, he says it comes from within, and then it says, as long as a man thinks, the struggle must go on. And so long, man must have some form of religion. That means he is equating that the birth of religion in the minds of people happen because every man is struggling. So whether it is Prerit, Anshula, or Aditya, or anybody for that matter on this earth, there is a life struggle. And because of that struggle, because your life is a mixed bag, a bag of mixed things, mixed experience, good and bad. Your struggle is going on. And as long as you are struggling, you need religion. As many minds, as many life experiences, so many different forms of religion. जितनी सोच होगी दुनिया में अलग अलग लोगों के अलग अलग स्ट्रगल के, उतनी उतनी धर्म होगी, उतना उतना रिलीजन की बात होगी. So that means if there are 100 people living in this world, there will be 100 religions. Now this is quite a confusing thing. Then the author says, no, it is not. Although we may think so. But it says there is a harmony in this chaos. There is music in this noise, provided you are willing to catch the tone. If you can recognize the tone, you will find the music. So the relevant chunks, or let us first say, what are the facts? Hindu theory of religion. One, without, within. It says from within. Encircle the within. Make a flow chart. Put Hindu theory, encircle it. Let two arrows emerge out of it. Make two circles. In one circle put without, in the other circle put within. And just like the algorithm, no and yes, you put yes from within and then you proceed. From within it says, it is because of thought Religion arises from thought. And thought comes from mind and life. If you stop thought, that means technically, brain-wise you are dead and body-wise you are dead. Or if the body dies and the mind-brain dies, then there is no thought. Then you are no longer religious. So why thought is very important? Now he's explaining that. So there is a relationship. Why thought is the soil or is the cause for birth of religion? It says that every man on this earth is struggling. And because of a struggle, that struggle involves pain, failure. Do you have some pain in your life or not? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
What is your pain, Anshula? What is the pain for Prerit? What is the pain for Aditya? Are you ashamed of admitting it in front of others? One of the biggest failure of my life is that I am not able to become a sannyasi. That attitude of giving up everything is not coming. It is only a bit of it. At one point of time when I was young, I was 15, 16, I wanted to become an actor, a director. So I did all that in my school and college life. Although I was very good with science and with the biology, I wanted to become a doctor and I could not. That is one failure. I have to live with it. Probably you all are engineers, you could not make it to IITs. That is one failure that you have to live with. And therefore you will ask yourself, I struggled so much. And then you'll find an explanation for your failure, or you may not find an explanation. You did wonderful preparation. Everything went well, but still the result did not come. Your struggle went all in smoke. Now that is very hard to digest. And therefore, as long as your mind thinks, the struggle will go on. And as long as your struggle is going on, your mind is thinking about this, you will have to adopt some form of religion. Because you need to have a meaning of life. Why am I here? What the hell am I doing? And because thoughts of people are different, because of different brain structure, because of different life circumstances, he is saying, thus we see various forms of religion in the world. There are at least 20 varieties of religions in the world. And because of this variety, it is very confusing. And to make sense out of it is quite a tall claim, is quite a pride, is a matter of pride for somebody to understand this mind-boggling variety. And therefore it says, amidst this chaos, there is harmony. What he says is, don't get confused by so much of variety. It is not chaotic. There is harmony. There is concord. There is a symphony. और ये जो लोग अलग अलग भाषा बोलते हैं धर्म की, someone will tell you to pray in the west and someone will tell you to pray in the east. These are discordant sounds. Somebody will say that have a beard, and somebody will say have a beard but don't have the mustache. Somebody will say have the beard, have the mustache, and put a headgear over your head, like the Sikhs. Now these are the discordant sounds. And it says there is a note of concord, there is a note of harmony. What is that? What is that sense of unity that he's talking about? What is this harmony that he's telling? Everybody is observing different rules. But behind all these rules, which look contradictory or opposite, the urge is to realize that unity, that divinity, that God. And if you can understand that, you have understood the tone of the discussion. Now, Anshula, is it clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, the first task is to establish a logical consistency. And for that, you read and reread. You connect them. You process them. You build a framework of the various concepts. Then, based on your subjective interpretations and viewpoint, and appreciating the context. Here the context is Hindu theory of religions. That is the context. You need to understand how Hinduism defines religions. For example, the Christians believe that whatever we are saying is the ultimate truth. And if you do not believe in that truth, you go to hell. And since I am a good Christian, I need to save you. So I will try to convert you. That is the same with them, with Islam. They think that anybody who does not follow Islam is a sinner and he must be punished. And therefore they call them kafirs. It is their thought process. That is there, it comes from within. So this is the kind of an understanding you need to do, and therefore what you do is you locate relevant chunks of the text to illustrate your findings with quotations. So what are those relevant chunks? First line, second sentence, religious thought is man's very constitution. Second, impossible to give up religion unless he gives up his mind and body. Therefore, struggle must go on as long as you are alive. And as long as you struggle, as long as there is a struggle between the mind and the body, there will be always a religion. What do you do in religion? You do fasting. You control your mind. I will not have food today. You discipline your body. And there are different ways of doing that. The Muslims fast for 40 days. They keep roza. Hindus do it every week, 2-3 days. So they do fasting for 150 days. Somebody does it for 40 days. Somebody does it for 30 days. Somebody is doing it in 150 days. So these are various forms of religion. Now this is very confusing, bewildering. Then the author says, no, it is not. There is a harmony. You are fasting, whether for 30 days or 150 days is immaterial. You are trying to discipline your mind and body. That is also immaterial. It is your passion and urge to discover the ultimate truth of existence. And that is called the tone, the real, fine, genuine, core meaning of this discussion. So these are some relevant chunks of the text that I am producing. Okay. So what is the key point? So the flow chart that I described will give you the key point. As many men, as many religions, mind-body conflict, then leads to an arrow, different forms of religion, which is basically is equal to chaos. But there is a logic, there is an order in this chaos. That is what the author is saying. So this is the key point. Order out of chaos. Order out of disorder. So the great question, the second prayer, the great question of all questions of the present time is this. Taking for granted that the known and the knowable are bounded on both sides by the unknowable and the infinity unknown. Why struggle for that infinite unknown? What do you mean by this? See, man is inspired. One, there are some things of life which he knows. There are some things which he knows can be known, although he may not be possessing adequate knowledge about it. But he knows that, but through exploration, I can know what is there on Mars. I can know what is there on Moon. One day you will learn. So he says that the known and the knowable are bounded on both sides by the unknowable and the infinitely unknown. So knowledge is known and knowable, but it is also surrounded by something which is unknowable, you cannot know, and there is an infinity, does not end anywhere. There is no beginning, there is no end. You are always there somewhere on the continuum. But that is just a part, an infinitesimal part of some infinity. Stretches on both ends. So it says, why should a man then struggle to know something which is infinitely unknown? Why are we not satisfied with what we know? Why don't we just enjoy, eat, drink, and be merry and do something little good to society and accept that this is it? Nothing more, nothing less. Many people like to think like this. So whether you are a very learned person or you are a small toddler, you are told that to do good to the world is all of religion. That means all religions tell you only to do good to the world. And therefore, what is the need to trouble yourself by asking unpleasant questions of what lies beyond? Because that is unknowable and infinite. So whatever you say, right or wrong, you will always be wrong. You know, if a clock has stopped and the needles are at 12, even then the clock will prove to be true at least twice in 24 hours. Although the clock is not working, and yet it is showing the exact time at least twice in 24 hours. And this is called truism. Even if you become most learned, you are still an illiterate. Even if you are the most knowledgeable in your area of endeavor, you are still ignorant. The more knowledge you accumulate, the more you realize that you don't know. So this is the contradiction. How many of you really know what it is to be a human being? Well, you have cried, you have laughed. You have dreamt for good money, big money. You dream of a luxurious car, a nice flat, good bank balance. But is life all that? So, although the point here is that we know something, some things can be known, but whatever is known. For example, we know that this is a poison, but we don't know how it tastes, and we don't know what and when the dying process starts after you have consumed the poison. I can tell you within half an hour it will show an action, but I can't tell you precisely in nanoseconds at what time death will begin. So there are some things which are unknowable. Even if you know, it's still unknown. How are you going to die? How am I going to die? I know I'm going to die. But in what circumstances? Under what conditions? Will I be with my family? Or will I die on a road? Or will I die in a freak accident? Now these are unknowable. So if I continue to struggle and try to find this unknowable, I'll become miserable in my life. And therefore the author says, why struggle for that infinite unknown? Why should we not be content and happy with whatever is known? Why can't we just eat, drink, and be merry? Or maybe or do some little good to society? So it says, basically the entire paragraph, the key point here, the concept, the framework, adding this point. Some things will always remain unknowable. And yet the urge for knowledge will push a man in his search for the truth. So whether you are a learned man or you are a baby, and although all religions will still teach you to do good, and that don't worry about something for which there are no answers, and that most of us live our life on this basis. Since there is no answer, why should I bother? So the third paragraph says, luckily, we still need to explore the beyond. We need to go into the unknowable. Yes, we know the present as it is happening. You're sitting in the classroom. This is the known. And this known is being expressed. But this is only one part of that unexpressed. How much of knowledge and wisdom will you take out of this class? It's not being expressed here. A class is there. An interaction is there. Knowledge is being exchanged. That is expressed. This present, this expressed is only one part of that unexpressed. What is the unexpressed here? The learning that you will take back, the wisdom that you shall possess. So the sense universe is whatever we can perceive with our 5, 6 senses is only one part of the world. That does not make the entire reality. You all are science students, you know about Heisenberg's principles of uncertainty. So your reality can change. It changes because of your position. So it says that whatever the sense universe is only one portion. It is only one part of that infinite spiritual universe, which is projected into the plane of sense and consciousness. So you know about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. So what is the conscious mind? A conscious mind of a man is based on the dark primal fear. Half the structure of a human brain is reptilian. It is of the structure of a snake brain. And this brain is a primitive brain. And it is based on the response of fear. So every snake raises its hood in anger and wants to bite you. So our brain is based on these negative feelings of fear, anger, hopelessness. The brain that you have where you put the tilak, where you put the mark on the temple, that part of the brain is called the higher evolved brain. The Hindus knew it. And therefore they would put a dot, a bindi, or they will put some mark on their forehead. So it says that your 6 senses can only taste or find or discover only one part of this world reality, but there is something also called the spiritual universe, and which goes beyond into the plane of sense consciousness. Now, how can we explain this? How can we understand this without knowing what is beyond? So he gives you an example of Socrates, who met a Brahmin, came from India into Greece. And Socrates told him that the greatest knowledge will come when, for the entire humanity, when man studies man. And the Brahmin said, how can you know God, man, until you know God? Now this is essentially a very Hindu belief. You know, all our gods, all the deities, they are given a human form. And we have a concept called avatar. Ram, Krishna, Buddha, Mahavira. They are all called avatars. That means even gods want to be born as a human being. It is such a rare, such a blessed existence. And you are always surrounded by God everywhere. So whether you are sitting in this classroom, God is speaking to you. And who is listening to me? The gods are listening to me in the form of Anshula, Prerit, Aditya, Mandeep. You all are Aham Brahmasmi. So the Brahmin tells Socrates that man cannot study man. Man can study man only after he has known God. And this God, this eternally unknowable, you cannot know God. He is absolute, he is infinite. He is without name. By whatever name you call, he is still nameless. You have your rationale, you have your explanation, you have your reasoning. But that only applies to what is known to you or what can be known. So take any material science, chemistry, physics, biology. You study it, push the study forward, and the gross forms will begin to melt. So classical physics will become quantum physics. So from proton, neutron, you go to still more minute levels. You are refining it finer and finer till a point where you will be asked to take a leap of faith. Because there is nothing beyond that. So there is a parable where the disciple is asking and the guru tells him to break the fruit. He breaks it into two, then he asks him to keep on dividing it, to keep on breaking it, till a particular point where he cannot break it any further. So the gross form is now going to disappear. At a certain speed, you have read many experiments, Rutherford experiment in your 10th class. That's how you discovered the existence of electron and proton. So from the gross, you came to the atomic conception of material reality. And today, you have got a better grip on this quantum reality. And we are about to make, if we go beyond this, physics becomes metaphysics. There is a tremendous leap of faith. And that is a jump into the immaterial. There is nothing called material now. The physicality has melted. Now, look at our society, look at our civilization, just to explain the concept. We in India, the Hindus especially, believe that death is like changing your garments. Now, in India, war is a sport. Look at any warrior, look at any king in the history of India. They have treated it as a sport, as something which is playful, not to be taken too seriously. Okay, that is the tradition. So in 1100 AD, When Gauri attacks India, or Ghazi, Muhammad Gauri and Mahmud of Ghazni, when they attack India, he attacks India 17 times. 16 times he is defeated. And Prithviraj allows him to go back with life. The poor fellow attempts again and again. It is in his 17th attempt that he becomes victorious. And what does he do? He blinds Prithviraj Chauhan and takes him as a prisoner to Afghanistan. And then he's killed and he's buried. And every Muslim is asked to beat that grave with shoes. That is the enmity beyond life. Now, what is the difference that you are making out? Somebody who's taking this enmity very seriously. So he takes his vengeance, revenge. He blinds him, he imprisons him, he kills him. And even after his death, he asks his people to show disrespect to the dead man. Now this has happened 1200 years ago. Now cut back to Kargil. I think it was 99, 2000. And you may have heard about Captain Vikram Batra. So he captures the mountain height against a lot of challenge. In the face of death, he captures it. The Pakistanis have started retreating. He goes to the peak, puts the Indian flag tricolor there, and then he challenges the retreating Pakistani force with this dialogue, Dil Mange More. And one of the Pakistani soldiers takes an aim, shoots at him, and the bullet hits him in his chest. This is after 1200 years. Look at the impact of civilizational philosophy. Death is not final. You will be born again and again till you reach perfection, till you become like a lotus, till you have blossomed all your potential. You'll keep taking births, refining yourself, perfecting yourself, and ultimately achieve total perfection. That is the fundamental philosophy. So you don't take anything very seriously because it's a play. This is called Leela. It is a role play. The world is a stage. You've been given a particular role. You're trying to play that role. Now you don't take that role seriously as if it is a reality. And therefore, there is no permanent enmity. There is no permanent friendship. Be a good friend in this life. Forget and forgive. Be playful. Don't carry your enmity beyond your death. So, for example, there is a festival that the Shia Muslims celebrate. They kind of literally punish themselves. Ya Ali, Ya Ali. They do that to celebrate the martyrdom of Hussein in the battle of, what is that battle? Karbala. They are celebrating that historical memory. That historical memory of martyrdom of Hussein, even after 2000 years. Whereas in our country, if you look at the Hindu value, Ram has died, so has Krishna, and so many other big souls. And we don't mind because we take it playfully. So this paragraph is basically giving you, because earlier in the first paragraph, first line, it is about Hindu theory of religion. So the next paragraph, thus man finds himself driven to a study of the beyond. So it is always what lies ahead, beyond death, what is there. And it says life will be a desert, human life will be vain. So I think I've more or less tried to explain a few paragraphs. I cannot do the entire thing here. But the point I hope you have understood, that what I'm doing is looking at data, assimilating the data and the information, developing a framework, involving some interpretation, and trying to summarize. And I'm doing these two things simultaneously. And therefore, I'm trying to paraphrase each of the paragraphs into a line or two. That's it. Now, based on this, I'm connecting these key points. And then what is, look at question number 1. So what is the answer for question number 1? Anybody? Yes? Somebody here? Nobody?
Sir, I'm there.
Yeah, the babies of the world are those who, what is your answer?
I think tend to view things from their own perspective.
Hey, beautiful. Exactly. I'm very happy. Now I think your problem is solved. You are able to understand things better. Is that not true?
So
Okay, look at, I don't know. Look at question number 2.
I'm able to see 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. I am trying to go to question number 2. Yeah. The Brahmin opposed Socrates because he believed that man can, what is the answer?
Hi.
Yeah.
I
What could be
think
the answer for?
man can understand the part of a whole.
Yes, beautiful. Anshula, you are delighting my heart with your superlative performance. I'm very happy. I was a little depressed when I discovered that you're finding it difficult to comprehend the passage. तो इतनी देर से मैं तुम्हारी वजह से इसको बता रहा था कि बाकी और लोगों को भी दिक्कत नहीं हो, परेशानी ना हो. But I think probably you're getting the answer. And what, and who else is there? Who else is there apart from you and me?
So
I think
nobody.
the host is also not here or what? Okay.
No.
I am the admin at the moment. Fine. It's okay. No problem. So what I do is, good. Your option is correct. Let's go to question number 3.
Yes, sir. So need to scroll down.
Yeah. No, I'm going a little fast. Yeah.
So little bit up.
Little bit up.
And now fine.
Yeah. Okay. Which option do you think is the best combination here?
So according to passage, option D is not.
Yeah, option D is out. Yes.
I'm not able to find option D according to passage. I think option
Okay.
A, B, and C.
A, B, and C. Okay. See, uh, let's look at these options A, B, and C. No. Okay, means of
Yes.
inquiring into the beyond. That is true. We can use religion as a means to attain salvation. That is also true. Religion says that one should do good to others. Not necessary.
I think C is not discussed anywhere in the passage.
Yes, not
Yeah,
necessary. So
I'm changing my option to
it is
C.
the
C
relationship
option,
with eternal
A, B,
soul
and
and
D.
eternal God. Yes. It is A, B, and D.
Yes, sir.
C. C is the answer.
C option is the answer.
Yes. Because the A is true, B is also true, C is not given. I mean, it is something very generalized. Huh?
Yes, but we have to respond
But
according to
D
passage.
is about the part and whole. Yes, eternal soul and eternal God. God does not exist without you. So when a daughter is born, we say Lakshmi has come, right?
Yes, sir.
So because we look at a human form as manifestation of divine. And with divine, we only love, we express friendship, and we are always friendly. Are we so friendly in our normal life? But if you and me start respecting others as a manifestation of divine, that hate, that anger will go away. So let's go to question number 4.
Yes, sir.
The sense universe is, as it were, only one portion, one bit of that infinite spiritual universe projected into the plane of sense consciousness. Through this statement, the author says that, okay, of 4 options given. So what could be the answer for this? The sense universe and the spiritual universe are one and the same. No, false. The sense universe can never reveal the secrets of the spiritual universe. Oh, it can and it may not.
It looked like
So it is doubtful.
doubtful options.
Yeah, doubtful. Correct. The sense
That's why
universe and the
I have
spiritual
not
universe
solved
are
it.
mutually exclusive. Yeah, yeah. Okay, you have not solved it. Okay. So B option is doubtful. Even C option is doubtful. They're not mutually exclusive as per Hindu theory, right?
Okay.
D is we need to apply the spiritual universe to the sense universe in order to understand the spiritual universe better. Okay, okay, okay. So I think this is the logic. D.
D.
If you want to understand the spiritual universe, the spiritual law of existence, you need to apply it to our material reality. For example, do you remember that question, that story of a sage taking a bath in river where a scorpion comes and it is drowning? So the sage picks up the scorpion and the scorpion bites him. And the scorpion, because of the pain to the sage leaves the scorpion and the scorpion again falls in that river and it starts dying. So again he picks it up. So somebody who was watching it said, "Are you a fool? You are trying to save a scorpion and this scorpion is so ungrateful and it is biting you back." Right? So
Yes,
you leave him, let him die. And the sage says, "My true nature as a sage is to show compassion. The true nature of a scorpion is to sting. If the scorpion, such a lowly animal or instinct of species, is so honest and truthful to its dharma, to its natural behavior, that even in death it is stinging then me as an evolved soul, as a more complex and a higher existence, why should I forget my nature of compassion? So this story is actually applying the spiritual knowledge to the material world in order to understand the spiritual world better. Did you get it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The last question for today. What can the struggle mean? So that quote unquote wo jo diya hua hai, the struggle. What do you mean make out of it? What is the struggle that every man on this earth does? Ultimately, you may not do it now. But
Materialistic
once,
struggle.
no, that is true at this age, most of us do that. But that is not the struggle.
To
The
achieve
struggle will
salvation.
continue from your birth to death. Huh?
To achieve salvation.
To achieve, no. The most inspiring ideal to know the infinite unknown. To realize Godhead or Godhood. Do you get the sense? To become
Yes,
so
sir.
spiritual at the time of your death, because you have developed all your potential as a human being. Your potential of compassion, love, forgiveness, surrender, service. You have developed all these qualities in abundance. And now there's nothing more left for exploration, or there is no scope for any further development. And there you will discover face to face your God. You will know the infinite unknown. Okay? Is that clear?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think there is some problem here. Okay, fine. So I am at the moment then disconnecting. Thank you very much. What is the feedback for today's Anshula?
Sir, I'm really sorry. Initially, I didn't get the paragraph, but after you explain it, again, I get the paragraph. Maybe we, as you are
Yeah.
right, we are from engineering background. It is not so easy to get such paragraphs in one head.
Yeah. Yeah, Anshula. Very good. So that is why I was taking a lot of pain actually to explain this passage. So I knew
Yes.
you'll find it very difficult. So I was trying to explain each line, each paragraph, so that I make it crystal clear to you. But what is your feedback for today's class? How much do you give me out of 5?
I will give you 5 out of 5.
Okay, thank you very much, Anshula. It was nice to have you. You're sticking out with me. And thank you very much, and
Yes,
all
sir.
the best. And please share this record with them and ask them to do the assignment. And also, you also be regular. You'll do well. All of you, I think, have
Yes,
the
sir.
potential to make it, but you're not practicing adequately on RC. That's the feel that I get. Because in this passage, you should not have taken more than 10 minutes, at the most 12 minutes. Okay. But you took
Yes.
18 minutes for it. ठीक है ना? चलो तब all the best and God bless.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.